fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Several shots were fired as President Kennedy's motorcade passed through downtown Dallas.
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
Can you hear some say again, please?
You're coming out of problem.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Welcome to the Hagmann Daily Show, weekdays 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And now your hosts, Joe Hagmann and Jon Robberson.
Hello and welcome to this Tuesday, April 10th, 2018 edition of the Hagmann Daily Show. We are happy to be here today, and we got a lot to get into. John and I were just having a pleasant conversation just before coming on air, putting out some fires, if you will. And it was it's a good thing part of our conversations are not recorded, because we really went over the top there.
I think they all are somewhere, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. But we are here. We are ready to get into some news, as there is so much going on. It is hard to keep track of, and really we have to look to see what is important and what is just being thrown out there to distract us. Now, I'll say this. There are two stories that are front and center on my radar are what's going on with the Robert Mueller investigation and the Trump presidency, as well as the Syria, what has happened in Syria, and the awaiting of the response of President Trump and the United States. Now, we talked about the possibility that this attack, we don't have evidence to know whether this really happened or not. We have only video provided by the quote-unquote white hats, who are conveniently the only ones to ever, have the ability to gather up footage and whatnot when these events happen. We know that a Russian bioweapons team and medics unit went to the alleged sites where this chemical attack was said to have taken place and did a number of tests, finding no traces of any kind of chemicals that would be involved in a chemical weapons attack. And doing some research this morning, I found myself watching a few videos on YouTube. One was a fake terror attack where they made a car explode, and then all these people ran into the camera view and laid on the ground, and then you had people coming in and pretending to treat these wounded, these fake wounded. And also there's a video that I am watching. It shows children being instructed by terrorists on how to pretend that they have been hit with a chemical attack, with a sarin attack. And this video shows these children, they're all in their Hamas or Palestinian garb, and it shows they put on this elaborate scene where they have the people there, they're giving instructions, then they show the kids are playing dead or hurt or injured. They put stuff on their mouth to make it look like they're foaming at the mouth, and they run through this mock gas attack. And many of the comments are very interesting, and it talks about how easy it is to fake things like this, and even with how advanced technology is to just CGI create it if they really wanted to. But one commenter makes the point of, this is just one big theater. We're watching a drama unfold in a theater. How much of what we see is real? Is there even one country that doesn't do deceptive acting like we see in this video? Now, we're going to go to war? It's a crazy world we live in. Might as well believe in nothing. That was a comment from underneath, and I thought that's interesting. I wonder how many people actually feel like that. But that brings us back to the important question. Was this attack in Syria, did it even happen? Or was this a fabricated event? What evidence is there, aside from a video, to support the claims that it happened? And then if it did happen, who was responsible for it? And we covered this piece yesterday. Assad had no reason to launch chemical attack, unlike those who want U.S. involvement. This is written by Ron Paul. Washington and the U.S. media seem to have no doubts about the Syrian government's complicity in the alleged chemical attack, despite the fact that those who want America to stay in Syria have far more solid motives. That's what Ron Paul told Russia Today. And don't forget, who's just got brought on in the Trump administration? The warmonger, John Bolton. And what a coincidence.
Good old Johnny. Johnny's getting his gun, Joe.
You know, we saw this in April last year, and we saw it in 2013. The conflict in Syria reaches some kind of standstill or is about to change in a big way, whether the regaining of territory, or in this case we had the ceasefire agreement and one of the last rebel strongholds about to be defeated, and the U.S. saying that they're going to pull out of Syria completely, and then boom, magic. Another chemical or fake chemical attack. These people are so predictable, but what really bothers me is that the media doesn't question anything. They just run with it. Even Sean Hannity, I didn't hear him question the origins of this attack or the motivations of why Assad would do this. Tucker Carlson, I don't know if you saw that, John, the opening of the Tucker Carlson show yesterday, but he asked some good questions as far as who was, what the rest of the media is not asking.
Yeah, he did.
Pick it up
I did see it. Go ahead.
Where I left off, because this is frustrating to watch.
Well, there's a piece that I was just perusing before we joined on the Hagmann Daily Show today, and it's an op-ed that's curated at dailysheeple.com. The time for a massive anti-war movement is now. Now, Joe, I used to be a bang the drum, wave the flag, let's just blast them. Like the solution to everything that was remotely un-American or un-Republican to me 15 years ago, the solution was let's just blast them. And I'll admit that because I wasn't awake and aware back then. The time for a massive anti-war movement is now. I wouldn't have even read an article with that type of headline 15 years ago. It says an alleged new chemical incident in Syria reminds of a similar series of events that we saw last year. We are told to believe that each time the U.S. pulls back from the war on Syria, the Syrian government is responding with yet another chemical attack, and it pulls the U.S. back in. If you're genuinely against U.S. wars for profit, power, and empire, the current moment represents our best opportunity to push back aggressively and launch a real grassroots anti-war movement. The entrenched forces, think Nikki Haley, think John Bolton, and others, that's me, the entrenched forces who will stop at nothing to get their war with Iran and Russia going seem to believe that time's running out. As such, they're resorting to increasingly comical and preposterous interpretations of events to get their conflagration going. The war sales pitches have become increasingly desperate and nonsensical, which provides us with a window of opportunity to push back. Now, this is originally from the writer goes by the nomenclature Moon of Alabama, and the article Syria Timelines of Gas Attacks follow a similar scheme. And Joe, I'll hand it back to you with this. I'm sorry. Like any decent American and Christian, I'm always going to have deep empathy for any casualties that involve any children. But all you have to do is type in Syrian gas attack to Google, and the optics that come up, I'm sorry, but a bunch of them are clearly fake. Those pictures that purportedly show 10, 12, 15 kids that are all casualties laying on the floor, Joe, those kids, that's not real.
Right. And, just looking here at a few reports, searching for actual evidence of a chemical attack, I came across this article from 1 year ago, April 26, 2017. Syria chemical attack, what we know. More than 80 people were killed in a suspected chemical attack in the rebel-held town in northwestern Syria on April 4th. Hundreds suffered symptoms consistent with reaction to a nerve agent after what the opposition and Western powers said was Syrian government airstrike on the area. Syrian President Assad said the incident was fabricated, while his ally Russia sent an airstrike to hit a rebel depot full of chemical munitions. And then it goes on to say what happened. Witnesses and activists say warplanes attacked one of the cities early on April 4th when people were asleep. And then it goes on to detail, there's no evidence. They just go on to give you a story. Now, fast forward to what happened just a few days ago. Here is it's almost identical, John, these news pieces from 1 year apart. Syria conflict. Russia says no evidence of chemical attack. Medical sources say dozens were killed in Saturday's alleged attack, but numbers are impossible to verify. Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, said that aid workers had visited the area where rebel fighters have started leaving under a surrender deal, and they say that there is no evidence whatsoever to indicate that there was actually a chemical attack. The Syrian American Medical Society said more than 500 people were brought to medical centers in Douma with symptoms indicating exposure to a chemical agent. And I like how in both these reports, John, they say things like this. More than 80 people were killed in a suspected chemical attack. 100 suffered symptoms consistent with a reaction. They use these
always
double
leave that
speak.
out.
Yeah, and they even say this, the alleged attack on Saturday.
Always leave that out. And the other thing, too, that a lot of these sources, and it doesn't, and listeners, please, forget about political ideology for right now, okay? I don't care if the source is coming from HuffPost or Daily Beast, or if it's coming from something on the right. I'm tired of reading articles that never, ever, ever name a source, ever. Like the verbiage "sources confirm," comma, and then go on to write whatever you're going to write, or sources indicated. That's not journalism at all. Like there was a time, and it was within our lifetimes, Joe, where you had to have at least two sources. And sometimes, depending on the topic, you could do one named source and then one on deep background who could remain anonymous. And I would encourage our listeners, particularly those who have not seen the film, go back and watch All the President's Men. Robert Redford, Dustin Hoffman. It's a pretty good, it's pretty demonstrable of what journalism was like in the early to mid 1970s and really up through about the mid 1990s, when news outlets like CNN led the charge on sourceless journalism. And that segues, if I may, Joe, into something that's really put a bee in my bonnet the last 24 hours, because the Syria thing is just such a mess.
I just want to cover some numbers on the Syria thing.
Please.
And just finish this article about Russia's claiming that their military specialist, along with the Syrian Red Crescent, had visited places where they said these attacks occurred, and they have not found any traces of any chlorine or any other chemical substances that are claimed to be used against civilians. Moscow favored an open investigation, and now I'm also reading that a UN watchdog, the OPCW, is going to be sent to the site to conduct an investigation. So we will get from there maybe more answers. But Moscow said military operations had been halted after this chemical attack, and under the deal that was struck, 100 buses are said to be moving 8,000 fighters, 40,000 of their relatives out of the battered town. And hostages who had been held by the rebels are now being set free. This means that the pro-government forces have now taken full control of eastern Ghouta, and analysts say this is President Assad's biggest military success since the fall of 2016. It follows a weeks-long government offensive in which more than 1,600 people were killed. So that just provides a little
that brings up an interesting question. Bashar al-Assad has been in exile since 2011. So that's 7 years ago. And who's paying for this over the past 7 years? We know it's not the Syrian taxpayers, because Syria at this point is a failed nation state. I would even pose this question. Maybe some of CNN's sources can fill me in on this one. Is anybody even paying taxes in Syria anymore, Joe? I mean, we get reports like Jake Morphonius yesterday, who reported that the U.S. backed rebels, and I say rebels in finger quotes because we know that these rebels, this is not the rebel alliance from Star Wars. Yes, they are anti-Assad, but they're also pro-ISIS, many of them. So the American-backed rebels, again, according to Jake Morphonius, sequestered almost 400,000 Syrian civilians in this region that you were just speaking of, this Ghouta region, and essentially made them captive war refugees, which of course creates greater collateral damage regardless of who's firing the shots, whether it's the attack that has apparently been laid at Tel Aviv's doorstep or the Russian effort 2 years ago, or the U.S. airstrikes more recently. So as a tax-paying American, I've got to tell you, Joe, I don't appreciate the idea that we're funding and giving arms to and lending and aiding and abetting essentially a group that is sequestering close to 500,000 civilians and essentially putting them on the bullseye.
Yeah, and we saw after the last year's attack and airstrike on the airport in Syria that the Assad issued a statement saying, denying the use of any chemical or toxic substance, saying that the military has never used chemical weapons at any time, anywhere, and will not do so in the future. And Assad said that the incident was a fabrication used to justify a U.S. cruise missile strike on Syria's Air Force base. And that is a report from almost exactly 1 year ago today.
Do you get the feeling? Now, look, I'm
today.
no apologist for Assad, but do you get do you get the feeling that he's telling the truth on that one?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't believe that he is behind any of these chemical attacks. And, you know, say what you will about Assad or one thing he has done in his country, or did at least while he was in full power and the country was not war-torn, was he did not favor, you know, Muslims or Jews or Christians. Everybody was able to live peacefully under his presidency. And he was never a problem. As Peter Chowka talked about yesterday on Hagmann Report, he pointed out, you know, the how he was Assad was praised in the media for a long time until we saw this Arab Spring come along, and that, you know, we saw completely for no reason, you know, these people just start coming against him and wanting to overthrow him like they did almost every other Middle East leader. And it's just it's just so frustrating to watch the same attempt, the same propaganda, the same excuses, the same lies to justify some kind of military intervention in Syria. And then you see people like John McCain and the Lindsey Grahams and you know, these people cheerleading, demanding that the U.S. take military action immediately against Syria.
John Bolton and Nikki Haley, the list goes on and on. Yeah,
and it's maddening to have to listen to these people, you know, beat the war drums and basically pray for, you know, destruction to come. I don't know what they attempt or why Syria is so important to them, except through a prophetic angle. And maybe that's your answer. Maybe that is what it is. Maybe they don't even know, but maybe it is just, you know, prophecy unfolding.
You know, there's an interesting, so in pinning the article that we went over yesterday, Joe, I was looking at all different manner of optics day before yesterday, and essentially just doing Google searches and seeing what was out there. There's an image that gained a lot of traction of Nikki Haley standing before the General Assembly holding up two 8x11 images, Joe, of chemical attack victims and their first responders who are wearing dust masks. Now, having been through in the film and television production world, we have to get recertified for different safety training classes all the time because we work with everything from chemicals to potential explosives, and we do aerial rigging and we work around heavy equipment, firearms. We have to get certified for all this. Joe, in fact, I think I showed you one of my certification books a few weeks back where we get these little stickers and whatnot. But anyhow, I've been through these classes for dangerous fumes and for dangerous chemicals and how to read the different chemical insignia and so forth. Dust masks are completely useless in a chemical attack region. The dust masks are designed to keep particulates out of your lungs, as in particulates, like a little tiny piece of something that can go in your lung and irritate it. They do absolutely nothing for dangerous fumes. Zero. So here we've got the United States ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, and we've got her predecessor throughout the W. Bush years, John Bolton, who's now buddy-buddy with the Trump administration, and she's holding up these pictures for the world to see. This is worse than when Colin Powell was duped into pointing out the weapons of mass destruction before we went into Iraq in 2003. Those pictures make no sense for anybody, Joe, who works in the building trades or around any kind of medium to heavy industry and has ever been through any type of chemical training.
Yeah, and it's reading through some of other people's opinions, like this Ron Paul piece on RT, where he talks about, I mean, I just don't get how the people don't call the media out for this crap. Is it that people don't pay attention? What I'm talking about is we see this outcry again from people, and I'm reading it on Twitter, and all these people are condemning this chemical attack and they've already, it's like the Trump investigation. They've already decided he's guilty. They've already decided that Syria is responsible and Assad is ultimately responsible. Without any evidence, without any proof, this is their story. They're sticking to it. This is their propaganda. They're running with it. And that's that. And we see
it's the true definition of junk science, Joe. It's taking a hypothesis and placing it before whatever the experiments or the data determines. It's taking your conclusion and placing it first and then developing your investigation around your conclusion. That's the definition of junk science. That's the definition of yellow journalism. So that's what we're looking at here. But this goes even deeper, because if you're ready to switch gears, I am. I want to talk about, and of course, our in-house media analyst, Peter Barachoka, nailed this in his article yesterday and last night. It's bad enough that we've got all of this unfounded, undocumented chemical attack mainstream news that, as you said, a bunch of people on Twitter, a bunch of Americans as a whole, a bunch of these Americans, Joe, that they're still stymied in this Soviet era paradigm of America good, Russia bad. That's and I'm sorry, I love Sean Hannity dearly, but I think that he may be in that paradigm to a degree as well. Russia bad, America good. And you start from there. Well, the Soviet Union collapsed almost 30 years ago. I mean, the lack of proper journalistic integrity is so profound, but it gets even worse, because this from Gateway Pundit, with this written by Jim Hoff, posted yesterday. It begins: California senator introduces bill to kill free speech, requires state-sanctioned fact checkers to approve online content. Now, Peter Barachoka, of course, and we'll cover his article momentarily, he posted a great piece on Hagmann Report and over at American Thinker that picks up on this as well. But this jackass's name is Pan. He is a state senator from Sacramento, one of the big blue bastions of basically the failed state of California. And what he wants to do, and Alex Jones just absolutely lambasted this live about an hour and a half ago at the press conference that he's holding, that both Doug Hagmann and Tech Eric are attending today. Roger Stone was there, Lee Stranahan was there, Alex Jones, Jason Goodman, Alicia Powell, a number of people with whom we work in D.C., and Jones nailed it. So if this state senator Pan has his way with the 40 million plus Californians, get this, Joe, any website that posts news, like, for example, the Hagmann Report, if we have a consumer base or an audience in the state of California, then we have to submit our content to a state-sanctioned fact checker before that content can go out to the people of California. Now, back to this thing I said a moment ago, U.S. good, Russia bad. Well, I've got a gentle reminder for our listeners today. The Soviet newspaper of record, Pravda, was methodically and regularly ridiculed, Joe, as fake news all through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, because it was dictated by state-sanctioned fact checkers. And yet we have this State Senator Pan in California who wants to do the exact same thing.
Yeah, and Peter Chalka's piece on this is very good. And one of the things that, John, that I don't think a lot of people even saw in this is that in this bill, what they're talking about with this Online False Information Act is not only websites and blogs, and it's labeled social or Online False Information Act, and they talk about social media. But when you read about how they define social media, it is, and I'm going to pull up the actual story that Jon Robberson wrote because it has the language in there. But it's not only websites, it's not only comments on social media sections or videos. It also applies to email communications, to text messages, to phone calls, if you read the language that's in the bill. So what are they going to do? If you, that's like what they want is, if you text me an article, John, like you do a lot, and you send me the link, you're going to have to, I mean, how far does this go? Are they talking about even personal opinions that you're sharing via text?
Do I text the SPLC for, like, what do I do? Do I text? Right. So if I want to text you an article, do I have to send it over to Catbox Lady at Snopes first, or the Southern Poverty Law Center, or the Anti-Defamation League? I mean, maybe I'll send it over to the Reverend Al Sharpton. I mean, really, who are these state-sanctioned fact checkers? And I'm going to tell you something else too, buddy. Now you're getting me fired up. If California, who, by the way, is so politically reprobate at this point, they actually put a law on the books where waiters and bartenders in restaurants can be arrested and charged for serving a drinking straw, like a little plastic tube, to customers unless they specifically request one. This part of California's eco green divinity. But if California passes a law that is this draconian, number one, I will never step a toe in the state of California again. And number two, I will, as the producer of the Hagmann Report, encourage that we dismiss California altogether. Forget them. If the 40 million voters in California are comfortable with this crap, then they can go get their news from Daily Beast.
Well, John, that's just the thing. They're not comfortable with this crap. And as we've seen throughout history, even in recent history with California, some issues go up for a vote. Prop 8 is a great example where they wanted to legalize homosexual marriage. The majority of California voted against legalizing homosexual marriage, and the court throws it out as unconstitutional. And there's countless examples in California.
Excellent point, Joe.
And just back to this bill real quick. This is SB 1424. If this ever did pass, John, in California, it would be thrown out by the Supreme Court because this is absolutely a disaster and does not fit into the First Amendment. But it goes on to say this bill would require any person who operates a social media as defined internet website with a physical presence in California to develop a strategic plan to verify news stories shared on its website. The bill would require the plan to include, among other things, a plan to mitigate the spread of false information through news stories, the utilization of fact checkers to verify news stories. And then it goes on to say this, any person who operates social media internet website with physical presence in California shall develop a plan to verify news stories shared on its website. And then it goes through, the plan shall include, but is not limited to the following. And it talks about fake news and needing fact checkers, but it says the following as far as the definition. As used in this section, social media means an electronic service or account or electronic content, including but not limited to videos, still photographs, blogs, video blogs, podcasts, instant and text messages, email, online services or accounts. What they're talking about is, the instant messages, also internet websites, profiles, or locations. And Rappaport says, getting the picture, it's a free speech killer. If it passes, agencies of the California government will develop numerous regulations for enforcement, including penalties for speech criminals. Saying this bill violates the First Amendment of the Constitution is a vast understatement. Last time I looked, the founders mentioned nothing about fact checkers or warnings attached to speech. And then it goes on from there. Open borders and a flood of immigration into California are destructive to, my statement has been precluded by warnings and fact checker overrides. And that is from Jon Robberson's story. But this is an insight into the mentality of these liberal lunatics and the what you'd call warmonger neoconservatives. This is the level of control that they want to us to submit to. They want their only. I mean, this is the problem, John. And the Syria story is the perfect example of that. They're trying to present a narrative. They're trying to present their own truth, their own lie, as the truth. And when you have people questioning that truth, when you have people calling them out for it and getting more attention than the mainstream media gets, pushing their narrative, that creates a huge problem. And how do they mitigate, the problem of opposition or dissension? Well, you silence your opposition.
They tell you to shut up.
You censor your opposition, or you make it impossible for them to communicate their message. They need to control the message. This is what they need in order to further their lie. And coming home last night from the studio, I had on the 4th hour of InfoWars, and Matt Bracken was hosting. But Owen Schroyer, before he turned it over to Bracken, talked about these people. How can they change history? And it's by lying and manipulating the past. And if they are able to do that by placing their own lies as what is past, they can create their own future, and who's going to be able to stand in their way. And it's so important that we realize this and not let these people get away with promoting their lies, pushing their version of events, which is contrary not only to the truth but also to our Christian faith and to our founding republic and constitution. It's against everything it's against what every American should be involved in this fight, but unfortunately, nobody really cares, John. I mean, very few do.
Joe, this has been going on for a long time. Now, we can take umbrage to a degree in the historical fact that the Bible is replete with exhortations, instructions, admonishments against this. It tells us that at the end of the age that men will surround themselves with the things that they want to hear that will tickle their ears, and of course that's in 2 Timothy. But I was just reviewing, Joe, during your last piece of commentary, a couple of very applicable quotes, and I'm just going to quickly give two of them.
And I'm not talking about, when I say nobody cares, I'm obviously not talking about any of our listeners. I'm talking about the majority of the population who only is concerned about what is involved in their happiness, sports,
and
it
stings,
things of
but
the
you're
world.
Correct. Look, I appreciate you being willing to walk that back a little bit, but you're correct. The reality is a really big broadcast for us at the Hagmann Report is X number of hundreds of thousands of people that access the program either live or archived. Put our numbers up against Dancing with the Stars, and I think that what you just said proves very accurate, Joe. This has been going on for a long time, but it's cyclical, and our founding fathers and the patriots of the 18th century knew this as well. Consider these two quotes. Quote, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties, nor can any be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. On the contrary, when people are universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink under their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders." Now, that's quote number one. And quote number two, and this is going directly to the Californians who would actually sit back and allow this crackpot state senator Pan, this goofy goggled idiot, to actually get this bill pushed through the California State Assembly, the state Senate. And this is, of course, a very famous quote. "If you love wealth better than liberty, if the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you are our countrymen." Sorry, California, that's a message for you today. You need to stop this thing. And the conservative red tidal pool in California needs to once again be reanimated into this great contest of our time and become once again a great red tidal wave. Let's not forget, California voted for Ronald Reagan twice, but both of those quotes are from Samuel Adams.
Oh, they're great quotes, John.
he wrote that. Well, Samuel Adams was truly a writer and orator, but they're both from over 200 years ago. And I just want to reiterate quickly, Joe, I'll give it back to you. The second quote starts with, "If you love wealth better than liberty," Hollywood, Silicon Valley, San Francisco with your $4,000 a month studio apartments. "If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude," that's to the staff at Google. That's to people sitting around their production meetings at Universal and Warner Brothers and Disney today. "The tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom." Joe, congratulations. You and I are part of the animating contest of freedom. And I just pray, God, that somehow some divine, Joe, in my little mental man's mind, I can't see a way out of this, but I know that God is sovereign and he can do great things, but without divine intervention, I don't see how we come back together with the people in California, Massachusetts, Connecticut, etc.
Well, that's what's going to have to happen. And, on our Patreon broadcast over the weekend, I forget who it was that they were talking about justice and, praying that the Lord, that we see justice as far as with what they're doing to President Trump. And I said, in the attitude probably I have right now, that how I operate, I don't expect justice to happen. I don't expect to see the Hillary Clintons, the John Podestas. I don't expect to see the Comeys and the Rosensteins perp-walked, as many do expect to see that happen. And I was taken to task a little bit by somebody saying, well, that's because your faith isn't strong enough. I don't think those words were said, but you need to pray more about this. And I thought about that. And is that appropriate to pray for other people to receive justice? I know to pray for righteousness and the Lord's justice, absolutely. But we know this. We're promised this. As a Christian, as a believer, as far as our relationship with the world, it's only going to get worse. We're only going to be mocked more, ridiculed more. We're only going to be sought out more, censored more, persecuted more. The world is going to hate us, just like Scripture says. And it's only going to get worse. Don't expect any victories in the public arena. But what you said, John, is something that we just don't know how it's going to happen. But the Lord is going to bring a massive revival to his people and wake up a number of other people when he pours out his Holy Spirit. And we don't know about how those divine interventions work. And, of course, we continue to pray for him. But I said that to say, there are two components here. You have the spiritual component, and then you have the human component. And what we see is the spirit component affects our human behavior. And it seems that evil has a much more firm grasp on a majority of people who were just atheists before. Maybe they were agnostic, or maybe they, hate God. But we've seen this evil become emboldened. And I don't know that there is walking that back. Now, I'm not saying that that's, that means that we will just be constantly defeated in this world until the Lord returns, because the Lord will protect his people. But I just don't, people have this sense of hope that things at some point, that all these arrests are going to happen and the clouds are going to clear up and it's, everything's going to be sunshine and roses. But that's not going to happen until the Lord returns and establishes his kingdom.
You've opened up a big can of worms there, and I agree with your take on this. Now, I would advise that we keep in mind, and I think a good example is the way cops work. Okay, whether you're a gold badge or whether you're just a uniform on the street, cops know that drugs get sold. Unfortunately, humans are trafficked, rapes occur, murders occur, but they work a very difficult job, and they work arduously, and sometimes they work round the clock to get, for example, a child trafficker off the streets. If they've got a bust they're working on, and they know I remember when they nailed that guy just a few blocks from my home in Pasadena. I've told you the story, Joe, where I drove by and there were 100+ bankers boxes out on the front lawn of this house, and I found out the following morning on the Bill Handel show that this was a massive child porn bust. It was like 4 blocks from my house. they took that guy out. Now, is another person going to come in and fill the vacuum because they make big money in child porn? The answer is yes, because the world is corrupt and evil abounds. But I like the way that cops operate in the sense that they say, hey, you know what? We're gonna earn a victory for the good guys today. We're gonna take this piece of garbage off the street, regardless of what crime that perpetrator's involved in.
And that's the same mindset we need. Yeah.
See, I was thinking about this. It's funny you'd mention this today because I've been rereading Patriots by James Wesley Rawls, and the new unabridged version is out on Audible, much better than the original Audible. And one of the questions that Rawls really tackles in that book is what duty do Christians have? These are people who believe in thou shalt not murder. We are people who believe that there's a certain righteous dignity in turning the other cheek. But at some point, Joe, when evil has crossed the line, for example, peddling our children into sexual exploitation and in some cases even murdering them for adrenochrome, or in the case of the Nazis in the 1940s, packing God's chosen people into cattle cars so that they can go be gassed or dismembered or whatever. People can call me faithless or they can call me whatever they want. When that type of behavior begins, then I think it's incumbent upon Christian men and Christian warriors. We have to stop it. And if that means we have to go by force of arms, then I will go by force of arms. And this is not bluster. I'm sorry. For me, the way I'm built as a man, Joe, I am not going to be content. I am not going to be placated or satisfied by spending time in the prayer closet if I've got to go shoot some people that are rounding up and killing innocent children or packing Christians off to death camps because of their faith.
Yeah, and I agree. There's a huge difference, obviously, between murder and self-defense, or killing in the defense of others. And that's up to each individual believer how they handle that. But somebody, and my dad has a problem with this when people talk about this subject. But somebody breaks into my house and they have a weapon, or even if I don't know if they have a weapon or not, and they're intent on doing harm, I will have no problem doing what I have to do to protect myself. I've done it in the past, and I'll do that in the future. But obviously, a believer, a person who does have faith in the Lord, knows what that line is, knows if you're being malicious versus in a self-defense type mindset. But we opened up a can of worms here, John. I guess what you said about the mentality of the police, that's what we have to have. We have to have the attitude of keep going. And this is what my dad never understands is when we talk about these kind of things, when I tell him not to expect these big victories or don't expect things to get better, he immediately goes to that opposite place. Well, then you sit around and do nothing. Blah, there's no in between. But you have to keep going. You have to.
Well, that's where the cops analogy works well. They know that at the end of the day, when they take a massive drug dealer out, drug dealer number 2 sweeps right in and cleans up the market. The junkies are going to get their junk. Yeah. But hey, why clip your fingernails, right? But Joe, we're running short on time, and bear with me. This is something we did not cover yesterday, and this needs to be. We frankly should have led the show with this today. This is from the Chicago Sun-Times. It goes back to April 6th, 2018. So that would be last Friday when you did the Daily Show with our sponsor, and I was in transit. Chicago Sun-Times headline, quote, Homeland Security to compile database of journalists and media influencers. The Department of Homeland Security, listeners, this is very important. Again, Chicago Sun-Times last Friday. The Department of Homeland Security wants to track the comings and goings of journalists, bloggers, and other, quote, media influencers, end quote, through a database. And this is already built, Joe. The DHS's media monitoring plan, which was first reported by fedbizops.gov, would give the contracting company, quote, 24/7 access to a password-protected media influencer database, including journalists, editors, correspondents, social media influencers, bloggers, etc., in order to, quote, identify any and all media coverage related to the Department of Homeland Security or a particular event. The database would be designed to monitor the public activities of media members and influencers by location, beat, and influencers, the document says. The chosen contractor should be able to, quote, present contact details and any other information that could be relevant, including publications this influencer, it's the first time I've even heard that word, influencer, writes for, and an overview of the previous coverage published by the influencer. Joe, this is East German, Stasi, Soviet-era, Stalinist, Gestapo, secret police, Savak, you name it. This is police state 101. And if you think for a second, buddy, that you and I aren't in that bloggers, journalists, and social media influencers category, then I respectfully say think again. And they are talking about nothing short of building a dossier, another word I hate, a dossier on you and me and Tech Eric and Doug Hagmann and Jack Posobiec and Alex Jones and Laura Loomer and Alicia Powell, and the list goes on and on and on. And they're going to call us influencers, which, again, words matter. They take the word influence, which really is a neutral word. One can be influenced in a positive manner. Joe, you could influence me to become healthier, or you could influence me to become more cynical. Influence is neutral. It's a word that serves whatever you're influencing. But to use it as a noun, an influencer, now that sounds, I don't know, Joe, we can't have these influencers running around. Yeah. I mean, these influencers, boy, they're going to be causing some trouble. We've got to round them up. We need to know what they're up to.
I think you're right on with the word influencer. I think they did not have a better word to describe the broad range of anything from somebody who writes articles to a commentator and everything in between. I imagine they've already had these kinds of lists and databases put together, and it is cause for concern. And yeah, John, it's just one more database we're gonna find ourselves on, and it's it's amazing that things like this continue to happen under the Trump administration. But how much can one man deal with? He's got all kinds of crazy stuff going on right now. But this is the Department of Homeland Security putting out a contract for someone to help them compile this data and put it together in a working order. And I imagine it's for just the worst cases that we imagine it to be. To not only track and monitor what people who are calling them out and maybe have an opposing viewpoint are saying, but also I think it's an issue to be able to attack the credibility of these people and get a better idea of who is influenced by who. See, this is one thing I know about the left and about many of these politicians and news people. So many of these people who follow the news follow what other people say, and many people are influenced by what people say. And I think they want to better understand those people who seem not to be influenced by media, who can hear the reports coming from the TV and radio, yet come to a different conclusion without anybody suggesting to them that what information they were presented with was false. Do you understand what I'm saying, John? I think I understand completely
what you're saying. It is.
They want to know where the original thoughts come from.
Yes, I was just getting ready to say it goes directly into an Orwellian term that we hear bandied around, which is thought crime, and that's where this I'm sorry, but this jackass state senator Pan or whatever his name is, I call him Goofy Goggles. Go look at a picture of him and you'll figure out why. That's exactly what he's trying to do. In fact, it even says, and a tip of the hat to Jon Rappoport, that's nomorefakenews.com. Jon Rappoport, regular guest on the Hagmann Report, great original citizen journalist. He nailed it. They want an insight. They want a comprehensive, that's why I use the term dossier. They want a comprehensive bead on us. Who do you call? Who do you email? Where do you grocery shop? What kind of Super Saver stuff do you use on your card? And we know all this stuff's been in existence the entire time the Hagmann Report's been around. People scoffed at it back in 2011, 2012. Alex Jones came out in 2013-14 and clearly demonstrated that Samsung was viewing their viewers through their smart TVs, and they made fun of us back then. And now that kind of stuff is in the USA Today and the Wall Street Journal. It's a. I used to, Joe,
like the chemtrails.
Before I started.
They deny chemtrails, every
And they're
which
right
way,
above
say
their
you're
heads.
crazy if you believe in them. Then they turn around and write articles about how they're, cloud seeding and geoengineering the sky.
Yeah, right. Of course. And again, another tip of the hat to Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org, another Hagmann Report regular. That's why the proper verbiage, the proper word, the proper nomenclature is so critical, because the government can actually sit there and look at you straight face. They'll trot out a John Bolton or a Nikki Haley to say, we're not chemtrailing. Of course, we're doing a lot of cloud seeding and we're geoengineering, but by God, we're not chemtrailing. Joe, I just to add a little levity to our conversation, what I just touched on from the Chicago Sun-Times, and I did shoot it over to you. I grabbed that from 2 days ago, and I tweeted out, so are we supposed to try to get on this list? Pretty soon I'm going to need a list of lists.
Yeah,
Maybe that's something Michelle Obama can do. We can carve a big new national database into her school lunches, like Chicken McNugget Georgia Guidestones.
Yeah. No, I think we'll find our way onto that list, John, as many people will. And they said it's going to compile up to 200,000. So absolutely, we will be on that list. Kind of switching gears here. I know we got about 10 minutes left. I don't know if you saw this. Talk about kind of a funny story. The biggest Black Lives Matter page on Facebook is fake. For at least a year.
What's up with that?
This is hilarious. For at least a year, the biggest page on Facebook purporting to be part of Black Lives Matter movement was a scam with ties to a middle-aged white man in Australia. The page, titled simply Black Lives Matter, had almost 700,000 followers on Facebook, more than twice as many as the official Black Lives Matter page, and it was tied to online fundraisers that brought in at least $100,000 that supposedly went to Black Lives Matter causes in the U.S., but some of the money, however, has been transferred to Australian bank accounts. After CNN learned this, they contacted PayPal and Patreon, and they had those donation platforms cut off from this site. But this article goes on to say, this discovery raises new questions about the integrity of Facebook's platform and the content hosted there. And Mark Zuckerberg is in front of the Senate today, and if you're reading any of the stories coming out of what is being reported, then this whole thing is just a setup. One, he's not testifying under oath. Two, he's a big contributor to these committees who are going to question him. Members with stock in the company set to ask questions, and on and on and on. So, it's just going to be he's not even testifying, basically. He's doing a Q&A that's not even under oath in Washington today. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. And then this one, sign of the apocalypse, trumpet-like sounds recorded on video in Hawaii. And the only reason I bring this one up is because we've seen, many of our listeners have been following this story about these trumpet sounds that we've seen all over the globe since 2011, 2012. Well, they got a new one.
And let me jump in quickly. Help me out, Joe. Who was one of our first guests? This is prior to my tenure with the Hagmann Report. We had somebody on fairly regularly who did very good coverage. Was it Stan? Who of these trumpet sounds happening all over the planet?
Yeah, Pastor
very
Begley,
fascinating.
Stan.
Well, go ahead.
No, Pastor Begley covered these at length. Stan also would cover these.
Pastor
too.
Begley joins us tonight, by the way.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what do these things mean? I have not listened to this video from Hawaii, but I imagine it's just like the other ones where you hear this loud noise. And I do believe there's a scientific answer to this. Many people like to say it's a trumpet from the Bible. But I think when we hear those trumpets, we'll know the distinct difference, and it won't be it won't be just some remote trumpet in one part of the country or the earth. But I think this maybe God's divine orchestra's tuning up. Yeah, that could be it, or it could have something to do with the Earth's magnetic field and the movement there. It could have something. It could be the Earth's crust moving or shifting. It could be a lot of things, but interesting nonetheless, and definitely telling of the times that we live in. And just one last story here, John, as we run through these quick headlines. After no hell comment, Pope gives the devil his due. Pope Francis has put Satan in his place, citing the devil repeatedly in a document published on Monday following a Vatican rebuke last month of a journalist who quoted him as saying hell doesn't exist. In the document known as the apostolic exhortation called Rejoice and Be Glad, sounds like a Joel Osteen book, the Pope also bewails the amount of defamation and slander spread online by some Roman Catholic bloggers and Twitter users. Satan gets more than a dozen mentions in the document as Francis talks about how life can be a constant struggle against the devil, the prince of evil. He continues in the same section, hence we should not think of the devil as a myth, a representation, a symbol, a figure of speech, or an idea. This mistake would lead us to let down our guard, to grow careless and end up more vulnerable. Francis refers to the wiles of the devil, or spirit of the devil, keeping the devil at bay, how to banish the devil, snares and temptations from the devil. Jeez. Okay, on March 29th, the Vatican felt compelled to reaffirm the existence of hell after an interview quoted Francis as saying it does not exist. So, I mean, what do we take this as? Is this just him, the Pope, trying to right his wrong from last month? I mean, why write a paper about Satan? Who cares? I mean...
Dear Pope Francis, if the devil exists, comma, where does he live? Question mark. Signed, John.
There you go. That's pretty funny. And what's the deal with him titling this report about the devil, Rejoice and Be Glad? I don't really get how that works either. But
not only that, but what's this idea, again, I'm not slamming our saved by the blood of Christ Catholic brothers and sisters, but what's this whole idea of encyclicals anyway? My understanding of an encyclical, now that's not an encyclical that you just read, Joe, but encyclicals, and feel free to email me and correct me if I'm wrong here, encyclicals, and a few of them come out a year. We had one a few years back where the Pope stated that if extraterrestrials show up and they have an expanded version of the gospel, we need to listen to them because they know what they're talking about. And encyclicals are supposed to be like an addendum to the 66 books of the Bible, although I guess it's more like 72 if you're using the Dewey-Reams Bible. But nonetheless, no man on this planet has any business sending out memos that add to God's inerrant word.
Yeah, that's right. And, I guess it's nothing more than a speech or a personal opinion on something, John. It really, to me, I've never read one that has really added or helped me see, gain insight or anything like that with spiritual matters. It's just more common sense commentary on the Bible. But either way, always pay attention to the Pope just to see what kind of crazy or ridiculous statements they make. It doesn't matter which Pope it is, they all seem to do it, and they all seem to have that same liberal spirit that we see promoted so constantly in our society, and that's what makes it so aggravating. Real quick here, John, as we only have a few seconds left, our sponsor, simplycleanfoods.net. Simplycleanfoods.net is a great company for all your food, survival food, preparatory food, and anything in between, even to snack on. The coffee is great. The promo code is SimplyClean. This is a veterans Christian-owned company. The food is GMO free. There is only one ingredient per food, and you can get anything from just some small sample packs all the way up to a 1 year or more food supply, like the alt media pack. Remember, simplycleanfoods.net with the promo code SimplyClean, and you can contact Chance for any questions that you may have. They also do kind of like not layaway, but no interest, no money down, no interest for 6 months, things like that. They're very accommodating. So again, visit simplycleanfoods.net with the promo code SimplyClean, and we want to thank them for being sponsors of the Hagmann Daily Show and also of the upcoming Occupy 2018 conference that will be going on starting in just 10 days in Canton, Ohio. So make sure you go to Coach Dave Live to register there. All right, John, it was a great show. We will be back tonight.
The Hagmann Daily Show is brought to you by the Hagmann Report. Tune in to the Hagmann Report weekdays, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to HagmannReport.com. That's HagmannReport.com.